Hi, everybody. This is Al. We're in Philadelphia at the University of Pennsylvania, Kelly Writer's House. Kelly Writer's House. Kelly Writer's House. Writing.upenn.edu/ WH, not KWH. Thanks, Lil. I want to get started right away. This is our last regular webcast. But on Monday, which is just a few days from now, we will finish the synchronous live all together session symposium of ModPo 2014. And at that point, we will go just a little bit dormant. Some of us, like Julia and I, are going to take a break. Not for too long, but probably. Yeah. So you won't see us in the forums, but you're going to see a lot of the community TAs and some of the TAs and many of your brothers and sisters who, in the forums, will continue to talk. And I'll send a note out about this. But we urge you to stay with ModPo. Anyone who enrolls in ModPo, who is enrolled in ModPo by the evening of November, Philly time, the evening of November 17th, can have access to the course after that. Zach and Chris make sure that we confirm that with Coursera. The idea is that after November 17th, those who attempt to enroll will be told to enroll in the next session of ModPo, and that next session won't be available for enrollment until probably late winter or spring. But we will do ModPo in 2015. I haven't talked to every one of the TAs and Julia yet, but I think a lot of them, if not most of them, if not all of them, would like to join us again. But I do know that we will be here in some form, maybe vastly improved, and that'll be in early September. So this is the last regular interactive webcast on Monday. Final words, November 17th, starting at 11 a.m. Philly time. If you can get here, please do. Just two preliminaries today, and then we'll start taking some calls. And the person who's on the phone is going to have to wait a few minutes because I have a little preamble to do, so I apologize. First, just a little show and tell. Ken McDaniel. Do you remember Ken McDaniel? He called from Louisiana a month or two ago, and he told me he likes to write letters, and then he wrote me a letter, and I got a package from Ken McDaniel in the mail yesterday. All right? First of all, when the Pilot fountain pen ink cartridge showed up, I realized something good was happening, and then Ken sent me a beautiful handwritten note and some paper, and a journal, a blank journal, so I can write, and so I can use my brand new 21st century fountain pen. I am going back to the 19th century, and I am so pleased. And my buddy from Louisiana, who's in business but is about to retire and writes beautifully, Ken McDaniel, has made that possible. And there's probably some rule about my not accepting gifts. But fuck it, I'm accepting this one. Thank you, Ken. All right, so what I want to do... Did I do something wrong? Do we have rules? Are there rules about
There might have been one about not cursing, but I think we said fuck that one too.
No.
Okay.
This is not FCC. Is anybody from the FCC watching? You know, Jason Zuzka is actually a secret FCC agent.
Yeah, right.
And he's in a deep sleeper mode because it's been like 3 years with us, and he finally revealed he's a sleeper. I shouldn't talk about sleepers in a global. That's just like I'm making so many mistakes. Okay. All right. I want to say hello to everybody, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to read two posts that I wrote this morning to the forums and get people's reactions to them. So everybody there in Google Hangouts, get ready to listen to what I'm saying. This is the only way you'll listen to me at this point. You're all doing your homework and thinking about your courses and all that other stuff. So I'm going to read it and call on you and ask you just to respond. In both cases, it's about how we define poetry, and it's a very difficult and vexed question. But first of all, hello to Amaris. Amaris, hello.
Hello.
Hey there, buddy.
Hi.
Anna in Boston. I assume you're still in Boston. Hello. Hi. You're unmuting badly. Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Somebody in the forum said that I treat you meanly in the videos. Do
what?
I?
No, it's banter.
They don't understand we have that kind of relationship. Yeah. They think that I'm too nice to Emily, that everything Emily says I praise, and that I'm tough on you.
Well, Emily's brilliant, so
Yeah, I mean, the point is that Emily's so brilliant that how could you not praise her? And as far as being tough on you, I don't know. I can't explain it, but I just want everybody to know we have a very special friendship, and I can be mean to you because I know you won't fall apart. Not to say that Emily would fall apart. She's immune to falling apart as a result of things that I would say to her. Hi, Emily. Good morning.
Hi, Al. Good morning.
Good morning. Erica Kaufman, you are at Bard College, upstate New York, where the leaves have all fallen. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Al.
And thank you again, in retrospect, for contributing this session of ModPo. Really appreciate it. Max McKenna in Chicago, congratulations on a really great meetup last night at the Poetry Foundation in the Windy City.
Thank you, Al. It was really great. There was a couple of familiar faces. Matt Corey was there, Bill Whelan, Sylvia Mann, Mary Roden, and a couple people who were...
Wait, Sylvia Mann was there?
Yeah, Sylvia Mann was there.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, she was great.
Sylvia is really great. I really like Sylvia. I've never met her or anything, but she seems great.
She's lovely.
And Molly O'Neill early in the morning. She's so early that she's talking in a room with other people sleeping. So I don't know how you're going to pull that off.
I'm outside. We'll see how it goes.
Wow, you're outside. I love L.A. Don't you love L.A.? And here we have a bunch of people, but I just want to particularly say hello to Dave Poplar. Dave.
Morning, afternoon.
Good morning, afternoon. And Julia Block, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Hello. And Dan Bergman is here at the table. His sort of rookie experience at the table, but he is no rookie because he's a veteran, because he's been involved with ModPo since the beginning, and he has a lot to say. So, and Kate Hersland, who will speak when Dan writes. And there are others, including Jason. Hello.
Hello, Al.
And Lily Applebaum.
Hi.
You're being quiet today. She'll probably have some super bomb-like profound things to say, but yeah. And Chris Martin. Hello, Chris. Let's get Chris on there. Yes, and Zach Cardiner. Hello, Zach. He's going to wave. That's Zach. That's as close as you're ever going to come to Zach. Okay. And we have Mary is here, and I believe Omar. Omar and Logan. You traveled. Yeah. Get the mic to Logan, please, kids. It's something like Tambora.
Tamburo.
Yeah. So where did you travel from?
I traveled from Jacksonville, Florida.
No shit.
Yeah.
For this?
Yeah, and I have some friends from up here because I'm originally from New Jersey, so I was visiting them, but then I traveled from
You
New
just
Jersey
made
to
really
here.
an exotic, exciting trip sound like you're from New Jersey and you're just going to see some friends. But that's okay. That's good. Welcome. Keep that mic.
Okay.
You know? So Mary, Omar, and I saw Eric. And Eric's here. Good morning, everybody. Okay, I'm just going to quickly read some statements that I wrote about the widening definition of poetry, and then I want anybody to respond. I've been asked several times, and I generally, as you know, resist these kinds of general statements. Is this poetry? Is that poetry? Please, Al, can you define poetry? Somebody wrote simply, a very nice ModPo person just wrote simply, Al, please define poetry. What is poetry, I think? I was tempted just to refer that person to a poem by John Ashbery called What is Poetry, but that would have been snarky. So I didn't sleep well last night, and I had another mistake with caffeine earlier in the evening. I mean, serious. I ran out of decaf at home, and I grabbed a bag that was in the refrigerator, and I hadn't marked it, and it was caffeinated. Yeah. So I was up all night, and then this morning I got up really early, and I saw this question, Al, what is poetry? And so this is what I wrote. One can and should be able to define poetry in any way and many ways. If such categorization isn't free, then it's a terrible irony. Think art. Complicating things further, and Fortune, our favorite Fortune Buchholz, had said something about a Bauhaus chair. Somebody said, isn't this Bauhaus chair so poetic, right? Which is a way of saying it's beautiful. Complicating things further, as Fortune points out in her Bauhaus chair example above, we use the word poetry in 6 or 7 different parallel connotations at once in our everyday speech. Michael Jordan gliding up, 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 and up into the air, turning there and flipping the ball downward through the hoop is said to be poetry in motion, etc. The best approach to poetry and to the meaning of the very word poetry is latitudinarian. In other words, of the spirit of being latitudinous, or lots of latitude. Or liberal, I suppose, is a word you could use. Every limit one can imagine for the word poetry will close off further possibilities. It was said that when Williams published This Is Just to Say, that a refrigerator note to one's spouse can't be a poem. It was said when Whitman first published Leaves of Grass that it was a man's innermost feelings put down in words, but not recognizable as poetry. When George Herbert published his wild concrete poems in the 17th century, most people recognized them as poetry, but some were disconcerted by its relationship to visual art. Was he describing and also depicting an angelic bird's wings? Susan Howe reread Emily Dickinson in the 1970s and 1980s and asked, who polices questions of grammar? So who polices questions of what is poetry and what isn't? There's always an edge of definition. On most days, for the sake of new excitements, I'd rather meet you at the edge so we can work out what we each think, than rather do that than meet you only in the center, where we will certainly agree that what is there is a poem. Well, or both, I wrote, so as not to engender a huge storm of protest. All right, so I've said something about the definition of poetry, and I would love to call randomly on people, starting with Emily Harnett. Emily, what do you have to say about that? Is that an amenable definition of poetry? Is there something you would take exception with, too?
No, I love that, Al. It reminds me a lot of Some Trees, and I don't have the line right now memorized, but something about meeting as far from the world as agreeing with it.
All right, let's all do that while you're thinking. Okay, so arranging by chant. Lily, can you do it with me? Arranging. Lily doesn't want to perform today. Never mind.
I can say it. Do we have to say it together?
Yes. Arranging by chance to meet as far this morning from the world as agreeing with it. You and I are what the trees try to tell us we are, that merely being there means something. Go ahead, Emily.
Yeah, the idea that we're meeting on the edge of, the limits of poetry seems like it's made the type of intimacy that we have here in ModPo possible. That just meeting in the center on things which are clear and understood and don't need to be worked out interpersonally and through collaborative reading doesn't offer the same possibility for community that you have on the edge.
Wow. Wow, you're prepping for final words on Monday. That was really beautiful. Maurice, I'm throwing it to you. Any response to my statement about a wide definition of poetry?
Yeah, I think latitudinous was really apt because poetry, more than other forms of writing, perhaps is the one that most accepts and encourages the evolution of language, both towards the contemporary, the colloquial, and the collaborative. So.
Great, thank you. Dan?
Dan said,
you have to get right close to the mic, Kate.
Dan said poetry should be broad because language is broad.
Say that again, please.
Poetry should be broad for language is broad.
Julia, would you respond to Dan's statement?
Yeah, I think what Dan says makes me think about how so much of what we talk about when we wonder what poetry is what we wonder what language is. So what I think is really nice about your comment is that you're getting us to the conversation about what's so rich and important and weird and confusing and difficult about language itself.
But Julia Block, some folks in the forums, in the dissenters forum, were saying that if we decide that poetry is the same, covers the same part of the diagram, the same sphere as language, then we are, I'm paraphrasing loosely here, possibly watering down what poetry is and making poetry unspecial. Is it the same as language? It would seem that Kenny Goldsmith believes that poetry is in the same sphere as language. I have a lot to say in response to that, but I'd love to hear what you say.
Except that poetry emphasizes the way that language is made, and it comes from a word, poesis, which literally means to make. So we're looking at how language comes together, what we do with it, how we build with it.
So you just answered the question in like this question that I all caffeinated took like an hour to do.
I only had decaf this morning.
No, but you really did it. You just said that poetry is something that is made, and something that through its writing, somehow through what we call form, discloses the fact that it knows that it's made.
I mean, there's a poetics of any language. There's a poetics of
Right.
the stop sign that we were talking about last week. There's a
Right.
poetics of the newspaper.
Of any instance of language, of any example of language.
Yeah.
So what Kenny does in this book, Soliloquy, you know, this is an extra copy of Soliloquy that I have. This is really hard to find now. So the second caller, sorry, first caller, the second caller is going to get my extra copy of Soliloquy. Jason, can you get the door, please? So that's what we're going to do. Yeah, that's going to be really cool. Okay, so what he's doing, Julia Block, is he's taking language of street talk and lunch talk, table talk, domestic talk, and he is framing it in some way to make it poetic. Can you say a little more about that and then respond to those who say, yeah, but how does that make it poetry?
Yeah, so I think soliloquy is kind of importing the language that surrounds us into a book, and it gets bound, and it has a cover, and it has a title, and it has an author's name.
And an ISBN.
And in that way, it's foregrounding the madeness of the language. That madeness was there already.
Yeah.
Kenny didn't invent it.
Nice.
But what he's doing is showing it to us. He's making it into an art object, more of an object than it is already.
That's great. So let's go to Lily. Eric, we'll come back to you, but let's go to Lily to do a final word on this topic and then go seamlessly, transitionally to the first caller.
Okay, sure. Okay. Well, so yeah, I think in the difference between just language and poetry is like I think the most important part of soliloquy is the gesture of saying that of making the choice to record his speech specifically. Like I set boundaries to it, like 7 days, 7 acts. I decided to record the language and make that gesture of actually typing it out. You know, that was part of it too, like being more familiar with the materiality of what I say every day. So to like a naysayer who would say like, well, if everything is poetry, then nothing is poetry. It's kind of like there has to be that, what you said before, Al, which is a frame or like a gesture of commanding our attention in a poetic way, or framing something as poetry, because like people who have a wide definition of poetry still don't think everything is poetry.
That's right. There's still discriminations to be made. And in the end, if you had one takeaway from ModPo, I can't believe I've started that sentence. It like violates every impulse that I have as a teacher. But if you were to take one thing away about what can describe modern and contemporary American poetry, it is that somehow the writing is inscribed with the self-consciousness that what is being written is words. So self-referentiality, self-consciousness, metapoetic, you know, that's not to say that George Herbert wasn't completely aware that he was creating a poem that looks like wings in Easter wings, and therefore doing the form but for the most part, George Herbert was then going on and using standard quatrains and so forth to create poems that are about something else, where the quatrain either does or doesn't actually inform the content. So the modern poet that I like, that I admire, is the one that uses that self-conscious to create something so that you either reveal the making, disclose the fact that it's made, regret the fact that it's made, and you feel bad, as in so many of Williams' successful/failed experiments, or, in the case of Ashbery, make some kind of generous joke about the fact that I am just a poet and I'm not much more. So self-consciousness, up with self-consciousness. So, Lily, who do we have on the phone?
Jamie, calling from Nashville.
Jamie? Oh my goodness, this is Jamie Givens. Can you put her up? Yeah. Jamie, hello.
Hi, Al.
Hi. Have we ever talked?
No, not officially.
I love hearing your voice. I've known you. I've followed your struggles, and I'm just so pleased to be speaking with you.
Well, I'm so pleased to be participating, even though I haven't been real robust in the discussion forums.
Yeah. And are you in an up? You're in an up period, feeling pretty good?
I'm great.
Good.
I'm great. Everything's really great.
Good.
Yeah, fabulous.
Good.
You know, I wanted to say last week I was on the waiting, but while I was having an MRI last year, the machine was banging and banging and banging, and for like 30 minutes, and I thought about the poem Vocabulary for Peter in Three More. I didn't say that right. And that poem came to me while the machine was banging, and I thought, my God, if I can listen through the whole thing of that, this is really poetic, you know, this machine banging. And one time I was doing a bodywork session with a famous country music star, and they were jackhammering his floor in the room next door. They were building a studio, and we found poetry and music in the jackhammer.
Yes.
And to say about what is poetry, the New York Times had a
Wow, Jamie,
story.
hold on. Jamie, hold on. You've told two stories, and now you're going to get to a New York Times article.
Okay.
Can you just? I want to hear the thing about the Times article.
It's a thin place. It's a thin place, and that's all I want to say.
Okay.
Is that poetry is a thin place.
All right. I want you to hold on. I want you to listen to this because I want to go back to the MRI story. I'm going to ask Molly and Dave Poplar to respond to it. So what I hear you saying is that you found yourself in a machine. I mean, I'm totally, totally scared of, I guess claustrophobia is the right word, right? Being inside one of those machines.
Yeah.
And so, and I also have a gag reflex. This is TMI, right? I have a gag reflex at the dentist. And my dentist and I have a relationship where I'm not a meditation person, but for the dentist I meditate. I have a whole ritual, and I can get through it because mind sometimes can help get over the body's problems, not always. Right. You know, as you well know, probably better than most. And so you got into the MRI and you heard sounds and you made them aesthetic. You didn't want them to be random, crappy hospital sounds of this machine that was doing bad things to you. You wanted to make it art, and you related it to McClough. So I'm interested in Molly and Dave Poplar's response, if they have anything to add to that, because so Jamie is making, or at least hearing, art, and it gets her through a body situation. Dave, you're smiling.
Yeah, just because I've had a bunch of MRIs, and those sounds that MRIs make, every one of them sounds like something's going wrong. There's sounds that something makes when it's not working properly.
It's like the airplane you're on when the whole structure starts to creak, and you think, is that wing going to fall off? Yeah.
It reminds me of Cage's quote, what is more musical, a truck passing by a factory or a truck passing by a music school?
What is more musical, a jackhammer outside a factory or a jackhammer outside a music school? Yeah.
Yeah, so it's interesting to take those sounds and view them in a completely different context. Then you can see them not as this machine that I'm inside sounds like it's breaking, but you can actually see them as almost musical.
Yeah. Yes. Perfect. Molly, any thoughts on this?
Well, I think it's a demonstration of how important poetry is and how it can actually be self-soothing to create art. And I think the poets of the last 3 chapters would be so pleased to see are taking something so daily, so negative, so scary, and turning it into something beautiful.
Yeah. Well, thank you for telling us that story, Jamie. It's really inspiring for those of us who followed your story. It's very inspiring. You've got something from ModPo that's healthful, I think. Yes?
Fabulously so, and I want to thank everybody for everything, including those at the Kelly Writers House. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Come and visit us sometime.
I plan on it.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Terrific. So, what do we have going on in the forums or Twitter, Julia?
So, Taro Hanula writes on Twitter, I love these last 2 ModPo weeks so much. They encourage so many of us to question our views on what poetry is and what isn't. T. De Los Reyes is tweeting from the Philippines saying sometimes the language, the meaning is in the gesture.
T also said, give me all the books, ModPo, all the books.
All the books.
Holy cow, T. Yes, we'll
yeah,
figure
lots
that
of
out.
folks on Twitter. Sophia writes, every limit one can imagine for poetry will close off further possibilities.
She quotes you saying poetry discloses the fact that it knows that it's made. It's well put, Sophia.
Megan Worrell-Lepton has posted a picture of herself holding up a Kelly Writers House mug.
Aw, Megan, North Carolina.
Joy Retke writes, Al, fountain pens are cool. I'm using one right now.
Wait, what? What is cool?
Fountain pens.
Oh, Joy's using fountain pen while doing Twitter? I love that.
I know, I love that.
Absolutely love that.
Jeremy Dixon has also posted a really cool photo of making books for small publishers while watching the webcast right now, right this second.
That's really cool. So he's doing
books.
his small press work. I see the picture too.
Yeah.
With the looks like a Mac Air sitting there on the side. That's so cool. Dave, anything in the forums of interest?
Anthony Reiser said
I think it's Risser.
Risser?
Yeah.
The only rule of poetry is that decaf ain't coffee.
Oh, that's great. Logan, tell us how it's been so far, ModPo. What's it been like? Are you on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed reading all the different types of poets that are on there, and I really liked the community. I really enjoyed being able to come down here and see everybody and kind of really experience it and being able to walk around. It even inspired me. I'm taking the poetry class at the online Harvard one.
Yes, the Art of Poetry, Robert Pinsky.
Yeah, so 'cause it kind of inspired me to keep wanting to learn more and
Good.
kind of see what else is out there.
And where are you in your experience? Are you a student? Are you working at a job? Are you
I'm a
free
student.
as a bird?
Yeah, I'm a student down at Flagler by Rutgers. Or not by Rutgers. In Jacksonville.
In Jacksonville, yeah. That's great. Are you from Northern Florida?
I'm from Princeton, New Jersey, actually.
And how did you get into poetry in the first place?
I guess I first got into poetry. I was reading a lot of Sylvia Plath, I guess, at first, and I just kind of, I didn't understand everything that I was reading, I guess, into like 100%. But just kind of you read some things and you're just kind of like, that's how I feel, and you just kind of like absorb it, I guess, and that's kind of
good. And who's your favorite poet in ModPo so far?
I was gonna say Ginsberg.
Ginsberg.
Yeah.
Say why.
I guess I just like how he has how do I put it? He has it's pretty like common, like you can kind of read some of his stuff and like if you said it to someone else, it would they wouldn't know it's really his poetry unless they're actually a poet themselves.
Oh, nice.
So I really enjoy that, and I guess partially a little bit of what I said about Sylvia as well, with like just kind of feeling like it resonated with me in like a deep way. So,
well, I mean, let's all give Logan a hand for driving all the way up from Florida to join us. You guys in the Hangouts, you can applaud too. You're not exempt from putting your hands together. There goes Max. Okay, Lily, somebody on the phone is getting this really rare copy of Soliloquy. I'm starting to regret this.
You can borrow mine anytime, Al.
Ouch, Lily, you are just so sassy today.
This is Karen Ledford calling from Palm Bay, Florida, and she's very excited to receive Soliloquy.
Great. Hello, Karen.
Hi, Al.
Hi. What's your last name?
L-E-D-F-O-R-D. Excuse me, Ledford.
Well, I'm so glad that you called. You're in Florida, and
sitting outside right now, actually, in the sun. It's beautiful down here. But I'm so grateful to get through because I just have to tell you how much this class has meant to me. I have just relished every minute of it, and I'm very sad it's over. I actually got teary-eyed this morning, watched the last video that you were doing this morning with your TAs, and it's just been a joy. So I thank you for all the time and the effort to put into building this course. And the repeats you do of the live webcast, it's just been amazing. So thank you very much.
Oh, that's great, Karen. And so I think you were referring a minute ago to the video on Tracy Morris's African.
Yes.
And at the end of it, I went around and got everybody to do what amounted to final words, and that's the video. And it was just great that we were able to do that, talking about Tracy's piece. Why did you like Tracy's piece, by the way?
Well, it's interesting. I could say why I like all of them because other than the Baroness, who I'm not really sold on, I have fallen in love with every one of them. Most of them were new to me. I liked her because I listened, to her. Called the Slave Came from Africa. That's when it all started. That one.
Yeah.
And I was just enthralled. I went back and listened to it a second time, and it's just kind of the way I fell in love with Gertrude Stein because of the way they sound. I mean, one of your videos, Someone mentioned that, maybe it might even been you, and it really reinforced the way I have always felt at poetry, that sometimes it's just you love it because of the way it sounds. You have
Yes.
to read it out loud and listen to it,
Yes.
maybe not have a clue what it means.
Yeah.
And
Isn't
that's
that
also
great?
been, though, yeah, it has been great. And
It's kind of liberating.
To me, that's the word, because I've always kind of wondered, maybe I'm not putting enough effort in this because I don't really know what they mean.
Yeah.
But, you're very intelligent, insightful TAs also to help me grow immensely in their insightfulness about, when you do these close readings and the things they can get out of poetry that I never guessed was even there. So it's just been a joy. It's absolutely been a joy.
Tell me one thing. Did you ever encounter the writing of Gertrude Stein in any of your schooling?
No, and that's what's so sad. I was very close to being an English major, English minor in college, and I even took a specific poetry class that I thought was modern poetry, and I don't know where it left off. It surely wasn't included in one. Like I said, most of these were brand new to me, and I felt that's such a shame. But I'm so thankful that now I've been exposed. And I'm going to go back and do a lot more reading on a number of the poets. So
thank you.
Yeah,
that's great. I mean, what you say reinforces a comment that I like to make when people in the forums or elsewhere say, "Wow, this seems like." You're really pushing an agenda, or you've got this kind of locked-in syllabus, and why don't we read other kinds of poets? And my response is that you get a lot of other modern American poets in pretty much every other course.
Absolutely.
So what we're trying to do is provide modestly an alternative. I mean, certainly Williams and Dickinson and Whitman are in every course, I hope, but the fact that Stein is so little taught, even though she is central to so much of the poetry that comes after, so we are in a bit of counter-canonical work, but I don't think it's something we have to emphasize, and it is, if you want to call it ideological in a literary political sense, you can, but I don't think that's how it feels. It feels like providing stuff that hasn't been taught elsewhere. So, Karen, thank you for calling.
I can't say for everybody else. I do have one, just a short question.
Yes. Karen, can you do me a favor and speak your question slowly, because there's a little bit of...
I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay.
Certainly. It's about ModPo 2015. Is it the same course, just brought up again, or is there new material? How does that come from year to year?
Thank you for asking the question. So the main ModPo syllabus will always remain basically the same. Julia and I are just talking about one poem we might add, and when we add a poem, we have to take one out at this point because we don't want to burden to people. So the main syllabus will be the same, but ModPo Plus is ever expanding. It's a giant accordion. So you will come back next year, and there'll be all kinds of things in ModPo Plus that you've not seen before. And then there's the teacher resource site, and then there's this new site that we haven't really revealed, which is the crowdsourcing video site, so that people who go around the world making videos of close readings with ModPo people will post there. So basically... So for new people and people who didn't quite finish the course, we'll have ModPo, the main syllabus, just as it was. We're not tinkering with that. But for people who come back, they can help others, guide others through that first syllabus, and then have much more new stuff together. Our goal was not to create another separate course and therefore bifurcating the community, but have everybody in the same community come back again and again.
Right. Okay.
And we hope you'll be one of them. Thank you.
We will, and just be sure your TAs know that they are great. Wherever they are.
They are hearing you.
They are great.
Anna is smiling in response to that praise. Yeah, she likes praise.
They're outstanding.
And you are getting my copy of Soliloquy. Enjoy it.
I can't thank you enough. I'm grateful enough to be in on this, but thank you so much for the extra prize. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Karen.
Have a good afternoon.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Chris Martin, I'm going to play a little audio here. I'm going to play just a second or two of Tracy Morris's African, and ask Jason and maybe Eric and maybe Dan, if you don't mind, Dan, to comment on anything you want at all. We'll start with Jason.
It all started when we were brought here as slaves from Africa. It all started when we were brought here as slaves from Africa. It all started when we were brought it all started when we were brought here as slaves from Africa. It all said when we were Africa. It all started with Africa. It all started with Africa. With Africa. It all started when we were Africa. It all started when we were Africa. It all started when we were brought here as slaves in Africa. It all started when we were brought here as slaves from Africa. It all started when we.
Jason, quick thought.
Okay, now I'm starting. The what I find so brilliant about that piece is the way it folds time and the way it begins. Africa is where it begins, which is a word we hear clearly a few times, but it continues starting and restarting in a way that folds the listener into extending those words. If you were to just say the words in one linear sentence, you would move in one motion from point A to point B. But the reality of the experience she's talking about is something that is kind of buckled into time in a way that the only way to get at it is to mine deeper and deeper into the words. It never starts and it never ends. It's a kind of wound in time that the like my own stuttering at the moment, but that the stuttering allows us to I know you don't meditate except before the dentist, but it allows a kind of meditative space to open up inside the words, as if the little, inside each letter is an enormous space where there are events taking place that she allows us access to.
Jason Zuzka, you are amazing. I have something to say in response to that, but be really quick. But meantime, get the mic over to Eric, and we'll turn to Dan. What I heard you saying, one of many things, is that if we linguistically go from A to B, we run the risk of reproducing in language the middle passage, and that we must disrupt that, and she disrupts it. And that's pretty spectacular. Dan Bergman, who's a superstar, thinks a lot about articulation, and I'm going to bet he has something to say about this. So, Dan?
He said,
right to the mic, please.
Tracy is creating confusion in the moment of slavery beginning to evoke the confusion of the historical moment itself.
Dan Bergman. Holy shit. And we'll go to Eric. Quick comment, please, Eric. And then we'll go to the phone.
So Jason enacted the problematic that Tracy dramatizes. It was really beautiful to sit here, Jason, and listen to that. I
could listen to Jason all day.
Exactly. So My quick comment is about the definition of poetry from earlier, and I just want to say that for anyone who thinks that there was a time when it was, everyone agreed that poetry was a certain thing, read Percy Shelley's In Defense of Poetry. Go to Defense of Poetry.
Which is available online everywhere.
Absolutely, and we have our own copy here at Penn. And understand that this is a conversation that we are having over time. Poetry has never been something that anyone could own and say, this is it, I've got it, you don't. Because we are always prepared to wrestle it free to do new work.
Beautifully put. All right, thank you, all of you, and let's go to Lily and see who's on the phone, and we'll go from there.
Well, I'm excited to say Shannon Ratcliffe is on the phone.
No.
And she has something she'd like to say to
superstar.
Dan.
Wow. Shannon, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
We can, and you are a superstar, and I was just telling you in Facebook this morning that we are behind you, and that you are able, and you are going to be able, and able in your own way, right?
You're so sweet to me.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I'm sweet to you, but you're a hero. So you want to talk directly to Dan?
Well, I had a question. He said something so interesting to me. He said language so broad, right? He said that earlier. And I had an experience. My daughter is a senior in high school here, and she's taking all, AP classes. And in English, they are working on Dante's Inferno. So she was getting a little frustrated with an assignment, and I pulled up ModPo, and I showed her the translation page on Dante that we have for this week.
Caroline Bergvall's poem Via.
And we talk a lot about translation, and my daughter said, Mom, you've been telling me ModPo has helped you learn how broad a language can be, but when I read Dante and the translation has to be so accurate to get the meaning, that then can't language be almost minutia? I had to look up that word because right away I was like, wait a minute. But she had the assignment was she had to come up with her own, if she was quote unquote God, what would her 9 rings of hell be, 9 circles of hell be, and what were the punishments for each one? You guys, she turned it into a poem.
Oh.
And as soon as she finished turning it in, I will put it on the Facebook for y'all because it was so profound to me, and she used ModPo to help her. And I just am blown away by how much a ModPo just has permeated my house.
Your house, yeah. You and your daughter, our hearts are melting, and I feel like I'm a teacher doing the right thing by having you in the quote-unquote class. And I want to give Dan a chance to respond, but give him a little time to respond. So I'm going to go, assuming that Max and Erica and Amaris heard what was just said, to say anything in response, and then we'll go to Dan. So Max, Erica, and Amaris. Max?
I like the idea of language as minutia. I think that's a really provocative idea, and I'm glad that we're talking about the Bergvall poem because it brings up these questions of translation and it brings up this question of the archive, right, which I think is super important. I'm echoing like Tracy Morris at the moment. I don't know if you guys can hear that. But yeah, this idea of the first line of these beginnings of setting out and all the different ways that you can set out and start. I think it's a important poem.
Thank you. Erica, any response to Shannon Ratliff?
I agree with what Max is saying, and I also, wow, I'm echoing a lot too.
Does that mean, Chris, that we have an echo going out? Do you think? If you're hearing an echo, tell us by Twitter or something. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Erica.
That's okay. I love to work with the introduction to Bergevall's book Metal English, because one thing that I'm fascinated by is the way that she frees us up through translation to really think about how words work through and between languages.
Interesting. Thank you. Maurice, any thoughts in response to Shannon?
Yeah, just that I think it's kind of emblematic of what ModPo can do, that her daughter was influenced to make a poem out of it herself, and it goes back to what Julia was saying at the beginning, that poetry is really that idea of jumping in and engaging with language in a new way. So if she was at first sort of put off by her assignment and then was able to engage in that way, that's really exciting.
Yeah, so it's like teaching in waves, right? So Shannon is in ModPo, and she in turn becomes a teacher of the high school student who's at some heck of a school being assigned that Dante thing. Julia, you're a Shannon Ratliff fan, so maybe respond to her, not necessarily the point she made, but just to her.
Shannon, I just want to say how amazing I thought your, well, I think I read most of your essays for ModPo, but the one that you wrote this week especially, that used stroke or strokes as the spine for your mesostic, and then you riffed on it in your reflective essay. I just want to say how much I appreciated you turning your own experience of language into the poem. You did that literal making of language and showing us how your language is made, and it just really opened my eyes, and I've really enjoyed reading all of your posts.
Shannon, are you still on? Could you hear that?
I did, and you guys are making me have tears, but it's a good thing. You know, when you have a kiddo in your house, she's taken 4 years of Latin, so her ability to look at language is so much more amazing to me than my ability. She has taught me so much, but to be able to help her, I could not have done that without you guys. And that's like, I wish I was closer. I bring gumbo right now because you just don't know how blessed you make me feel. It's been more important to me, this class, than any of the therapies I've had. I've progressed miles and miles where I never would have gone had I not been in this class, and I just can't thank you enough.
ModPo as stroke recovery, someone's got to write that up.
That's right.
But I guess what I want to say is that what we're discovering, Julia and I and Erica and others who are, you know, teachers, Anna and Max, all these emergent teachers all around, Jason, Lily teaching while I'm in Prague, and we're all so many teachers here, that teaching is circulation. I've really lost track. You know, Eric shows up and he's so teacherly. I've really lost track of who's teaching whom, and I think that goes with the whole subject-object confusion that ModPo is about. So here's to a weird-ass pedagogy in which you know, we're teaching Shannon, her daughter is teaching her, then she's teaching us about how ModPo, it's a little like Jamie's call, ModPo is therapy's physical therapy. How could that be? Wow. Let's turn to Dan, who's an expert on all of these topics.
Well, first of all, Dan said, in terms of your daughter studying Latin, that's great. Latin is such a wonderful language. That's wonderful. And then about this minutia question, he said, language is broad in its possibilities. The minutia is another representative of that, in that language is the big and the small, and poetry is the meeting of it all between writer and reader.
Holy shit.
Oh, I love Dan.
We love Dan too. I was just yesterday out on the Locust Walk, which you can see behind us sometimes. Zach, give him a little look at Locust Walk. I don't know how bright it is out there. Yeah, Dave's got a duck. Duck, Dave. There's not much happening. Those chairs there that you can see, all right, Dan and Kate and I were there with a couple of other students, and we were just bullshitting. This is what you do when you're in a collegiate atmosphere, right, Dan? And we started to talk about how we loved each other, and it seemed like totally unironic. And I got an email from Dan later that night signing off, "Love Dan." So there's a lot of love to go around.
You guys know it looks like there is a little bit of an echo, people are saying.
Okay. Chris and Zach, who are experts on echoes, I hope you can persevere, everybody, through it. Max, maybe you can go. Oh, you're good. You guys are all off. Okay, good. Love is unironic. Oh, I wish that were always true, Dan, but from you it is. So thank you so much, Shannon. What's your daughter's name?
My daughter's name is Susa.
Can you spell that?
Z-S-U-Z-S-A.
Z-S-U-Z-S-A. Susa. Related to Jason Zuzka, so no doubt. Well, please tell Susa that we love her too. Why not?
Oh, I will. She watches all the ModPo videos after school. So.
Who's her favorite TA? Come on, you can tell us.
Her favorite?
Yeah.
Her favorite is actually Anna.
Anna Strong gets a vote. All right, that's cool. Well, thank you so much for calling.
Thank you.
All right, we'll see you.
You guys have a great day.
Take care and be well. Fantastic. Julia, can you tell us anything that's going on, and Dave?
Yeah, I have a great question from the discussion forums.
Yeah.
This is from Terry Talty, who says she's been reading Joan Retallack's The Poetical Wager, which is a terrific book that I know Erica has been recommending to a lot of us. And she says, I'd call if you were giving away that book. So
wait, say that again?
I would call if you were giving away that book.
Oh.
And she says the question it raises for me is, what is the obligation of a writer ethically? What's the ethical obligation of a writer?
All right, who wants to answer that? Let's go to Anna and Dave Poplar. What's the ethical obligation of a writer? Jason is like knitting his brows at that one, so I'm not going to ask him. Dave, is there an ethical, what was it, ethical what?
Obligation.
Obligation?
No.
No is the answer here. Anna?
No.
Oh, boy. Uh-oh.
What is the ethical obligation? Not is there an ethical obligation?
Dave likes simple answers.
I give the same answer. No, I mean, I think, well, ethics are what? They're a code of conduct that we create amongst each other. So what are we trying to do when we try to apply that to what an author is doing? We're trying to create a code of conduct. We're trying to create rules. I don't think that's really applicable when we're talking about art. Especially.
So I think you're defining ethical in the sense of ideological, but if we were defined ethical as striving for the good, huh? So striving for the good, which means Jason's still shaking his head.
The other classical way of defining ethical is relationships between people.
Well,
how do we treat each other?
Placing a normative
You're just too much of
framework.
an anarchist at the moment.
When it comes to art, I am. I just don't believe that it's helpful to place any type of normative standards on what is or what is not acceptable.
Okay. Well, that's a giant philosophical question. Julia, do you want to weigh in on that?
I mean, I'm really sympathetic to that book, so I think about the way that Joan Retallack thinks about writing, again, as like an encounter between people, between reader and writer. So it's a little less what are the norms that we're trying to put in place, and a little more how do we discover the ethical relationships that already exist in writing. And I'd love to hear Erica's thoughts on this too, because I know she knows this one very
Erica,
well.
we're going to turn to you on this thorny question.
Although I suspect that Erica's mic is the one that is echoing, so maybe we should resolve that before we turn it back on.
Erica's mic might be the cause. No, Chris is saying go for it.
Okay, all right.
Erica, before you try to answer that question and unmute, I just want to say that the poem that we read by the aforementioned Joan Retallack, Not a Cage, is a response partly to this poetical idea, which is to say, if I'm going to throw out books or discard or give away books, I have a kind of obligation to take something from them, I don't think ironically, actually, to respond to them, to create a kind of what Robert Creeley called the company, a community of poetry. And I consider that kind of work, it might seem, because it's aleatory, to be unresponsive to ethical standards, but I see it as a gesture, an ethical gesture. Anyway, Erica, you have a lot to say on this topic. Can you somehow do it briefly?
I find it really hard to respond to the question of ethics, especially because what Ritalik does in this book is she goes at great lengths to coin the term poethics, which is a combination of ethics and ethos, but also poesis, to make. So very quickly, I would say that what I think that poethics asks us to do and to think about as poets is to be very aware and conscious of what happens in the act of composing, and how through writing we make something of our contemporary experience.
That's
the way that
great.
Poetics is a way to give to shape and make legible what we're wandering through and trying to figure out what to do with. So that in itself, I would think, is an ethical project.
Yes, so well put. I think if we had enough time, I don't think that Dave and Anna would finally disagree with the way we define things. And it's also odd to have that question. This is the weird thing about webcasts. We just can't control the flow of things, because after Jamie and Shannon call us and we're talking about the way in which the community around poetry is a good, brings people to health. T in Manila says it takes a global village to raise ModPo in response to my idea that teaching is circulation. These are all, let's say, ethical projects. But at the same time, there's aesthetic standards. So the conversation gets complicated. Yeah, Julia?
Yeah, I mean, Nicola Quinn writes, the writer has no obligation. Karen Elanier writes, I agree with Dave and Anna, no. This does not negate ethics, though.
Right.
So
right.
I think we're on different pages that are in the same loose leaf binder.
Book. Yeah, same loose leaf binder. Okay, Lily, I didn't announce this, but I would like to give a book to this caller. And how about Erica Baum's Dog Ear? I have a copy of Erica Baum's Dog Ear. Zach, do your thing. Here it comes. There it is, Erica Baum's Dog Ear. It's not handsome on the screen right now, but boy, this is such a good book. All right, you ready? Zach, I'm going to open it up. Okay. All right, yeah, so each one is a page with a photograph of the dog-eared book. Fantastic. All right, so who is getting this book?
This is Pamela calling from New York.
Pamela from New York, okay. Hello, Pamela.
Hi, Al.
You know what? I'm seeing you tonight.
Yes, that's right.
That is so weird. Of course, there are probably 10,000 Pamelas from New York, but I saw you on the list for our New York event tonight, and you're there, and here we are warming up.
Right. I'm very excited. I can't believe I got through. I just wanted to respond to the question about what is poetry, because I was thinking about it, and that I think poetry is writing, and writing about the art of life. Poetry is art. And then when we were talking about the echoes, it occurred to me a quote I know about that Carl Sandburg said, that poetry is an echo asking a shadow to dance.
I love
one that
that.
I've always liked.
I love that. Thank you. And how is
And I can't believe I got that book.
So you're going to get Dog Ear. You're going to get a copy.
Wow, this is so exciting. This course has changed my life. I always liked poetry, and I liked formal poetry, but now I'm really, really getting into modern and American poetry.
Cool.
And that is beautiful. I can't believe I'm getting that.
That's really cool. Now, do you live in Manhattan by chance?
No, I live in Westchester County in Bedford Hills.
Bedford Hills. And you're driving
north.
down tonight,
Yeah.
and you're going to be in Erica Baum's neighborhood. So
wow, that's
at
right.
some point, I'll offline put you in touch. Why do we say offline? Separately, in online private communication. Okay. I'll put you in touch with Erica. And I bet that she'd be willing to sign that book for you. She's a very generous person.
This is so exciting. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. See you tonight.
All right, thank you.
Fantastic.
Okay, bye.
Wow. Julia Block, I'm going to hold up a book by Harriet Mullen called Sleeping with the Dictionary. Zach is going to get there. Do you want to riff just a little on what's so good about this poet in this book?
So what's so great about this book begins with the title. So Harriet Mullen imagines what it would be like to sleep with the dictionary under your pillow, to sleep with the dictionary as if it were your lover, and you're playing with it and having sensual relations with it. And she chooses multiple dictionaries to create this book and does a lot of experiments with the dictionary. She performs procedures, some of them Oulipian and conceptual. She riffs on words. She riffs on issues of power and ethics with the dictionary, and who polices questions of grammar, to quote Susan Howe. And it's a really fun, capacious book with lots of experiments.
So I recommend it. I have my copy. I'm not giving away this copy. I recommend it. And also, we are considering adding a poem from this book to the main ModPo syllabus for next year, which would mean recording a new video and so forth. And I think you agree it's a good idea. Chapter 9.2 maybe? Or 9.3? 9.2, right? Or 9.1
Yeah,
even.
you could see it in any of them, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, there's a recommendation. All right, so this caller is going to get a copy of Julia Block's Letters to Kelly Clarkson. And this person doesn't even know it. I mean, she or he didn't call for this purpose. But Julia doesn't mind, because it's still random, essentially. You get a random reader out of this. So Lily is doing her thing, talking to this person. Can't hear?
Hear anything that you were saying?
Oh,
while you
that's all
were
right.
talking?
I'm just ready to turn. I was going to say
Oh.
that this person, you need to get the address for this person, because we're giving away letters to Kelly Clarkson.
Okay.
Yeah. So who is it?
This is Vanessa calling from Greece.
Vanessa from Greece. Hello, Vanessa.
Hi, Al. Sorry,
Hey.
I just got the giggles.
This is so
Hi.
funny. You know what? You told me this morning, I think you're the person who told me this morning that you can't join us because you're a working person. And in Greece,
I finally managed.
and I wrote back and I said, the Greeks don't take breaks? Of course the Greeks take breaks. But actually, it's probably the end of your workday. You're 6 hours ahead of us at least.
I am, yes. It's
Good.
a late day.
So,
but I managed to get away. So it's great
Oh.
to talk to you. And hi, Dave. Hi, Julia. Hi, all the TAs. It's great to see you.
Vanessa from Greece. So say something, ask a question, make a comment, and I'm going to turn to TAs for answers or responses.
Definitely. I do have a bit of a sort of philosophical question relating to pretty much what I've learned in this course, and it's got a little bit of a preamble, so please bear with me.
Okay, we can hear it.
What I wanted to say is that the way I saw form before taking this course was very much a little bit like fashion. So I imagined that the clothes that someone wears, although they are a form of self-expression, are ultimately kind of trivial and unimportant. And I kind of saw form a little bit like fashion. That allows
Vanessa, I want you to
trends-
speak clearly and slowly because we don't have a perfect connection.
Okay, sorry. So yes, what I was saying is that I imagined form
Yes.
to be a little bit like fashion,
Yes.
and that it follows a trend, but is in the end not as important as the content,
Right.
which I imagine to be a little bit like the person within.
Yes.
But what I learned in this course is that form can be the person as long as substance is embedded within it.
Yeah.
And so I've really enjoyed learning to read in this way and also finding a new way to write. And what I think a lot of people have expressed concern about in the forums that I've read
Yes.
was about the balancing too heavily on form and maybe even mistaking it for meaning when there is little there. And the mind does have a superb capacity to create meaning out of anything. But the question is ultimately quite philosophical. And isn't all art finally an effort to draw out of the viewer or the reader his own meaning? And so in the end, does the author's intent really matter?
Wow. Thank you for the question. And I am dying. Anna's giving me a face. She doesn't want me to call on her. But Amaris is always ready. Amaris, would you attempt to respond to Vanessa? Vanessa's still on the phone, so we can ask her for follow-ups as needed. Good luck, Amaris.
Well, I think we've seen through this course ways in which form and content are inextricable and that they create meaning together. So Bergvall's project in VIA, for example, was to show how language gets translated across multiple languages, multiple interpretations, and how the reader has to enter into the poem in order to come up with their own sort of meaning for it. So when you ask if we over-prioritize the form, Bergvall, in coming up with a procedure, is exposing an aspect of language to us that is fundamental to her poetics. And it is important that we understand that approach she's taking in order to reconfigure our own approach to language. So both content and form in VIA, for example, are working together to convey that new relation to language, and then it's up to us to engage with that.
Wow, that's brilliant. Thank you so much, Amaris. Max, you're on. Can you you want to follow up on Amaris or respond to Vanessa?
Well, I like the idea of, not that I entirely agree with it, but I like the idea of form as fashion, because it takes us back to Stein's The Long Dress, right?
Absolutely, it does.
Thinking of the current that makes machinery, but I think that the clothes are hugely important. I mean, I don't think that it's just something you can peel away to get at the kind of naked person underneath. I mean, right? There's a reason why we, for thousands of years have been putting on clothes. There's various psychoanalytic Freudian readings or something of why we do that. But I mean, it's something that you have to pay attention to, and it's something that has a lot of substance in itself. And there's a whole, as Stein calls our attention to, there's a whole kind of labor history, right, to be read into fashion, into the now, into what's current, into what we might want to call superficial or something, or hip or trendy. There's a lot more going on there than just surfaces. I think that there's things that we have to pay attention to.
Max, is it at all productive to use the following ratio that was implicit in Vanessa's comment, which is that clothing is to the person as form is to content? Is that helpful?
Clothing is to the person as form is to content. That is the ratio implicit in Vanessa's comment, but I would disagree. I don't think that that's quite the whole thing. Actually, I'd be interested to hear Vanessa elaborate. Actually, since she's still on.
Vanessa, are you still on?
Yeah, I'm still here.
So you did not say this explicitly, but I, being the teacher that I am, I always have you noticed, by the way, I have a technique of slightly misparaphrasing, mis-summarizing people, so that then I put it back to them.
I think you do it quite well.
Yeah.
But what I did say is that this is the opinion I had about form before I took the course.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Right? And that what I said is that I changed my mind during the course, and I realized that form can actually be a form of communicating meaning.
Yeah.
Rather than just an accessory.
Right.
So
yes.
What I was trying to say is that through this course, I managed to understand the actual importance of form, and I was not being dismissive about it.
No, you didn't take it that way, but that's where you began. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's where I did begin before I started sort of listening to your discussions and seeing how form actually conveys meaning.
Yeah, that's great. So your comment really was in motion.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Dave Poplar and then Dan.
Just a comment on that. To add to that analogy, a uniform is still a uniform, and a uniform itself is a form and conveys a lot of important information. You see a lot of dictators who wear the same uniform to convey a certain meaning. So in that sense, I think you can look at fashion as form, as meaning.
Dan?
Point earlier that
you got to move right to the mic.
Yeah, sorry. Dan had a point earlier that's relevant for this that he wanted to share now. He had said, as far as meaning making, he had said meaning is made together in language and poetry is meaning is made together in language, and poetry is the gesture to reach out to make meaning between writer and reader.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Julia, final word to Vanessa on any of this?
I really like what Dave just said about the uniform. I mean, it makes me want to close read the word itself, uniform. form means one form fits all. It has an ideology, and it has often a politics behind it, and fashion is maybe infinitely variable in much the same way language is. But I'm also with Max on the idea that it's not a perfect analogy.
And is the alternative to uniform multiform? Or can that be a uniform?
I think that can be a uniform, but I think another alternative is not seeing a clear separation between. I mean, some people might say the body is a kind of uniform. The body is a form. It's a form that we read. We ascribe certain meanings to kinds of bodies and parts of bodies. So the separation is not an obvious one.
Vanessa, you just were looking on the screen at the author of this book, Julia Block.
I'm so pleased. I'm so pleased. Thank you so much.
You'll love this book.
Wait to
it's
read
wonderful.
it.
Yeah.
There's a lot about clothing in that book.
There's a lot about clothing, and it's a book
brilliant.
of letters to Kelly Clarkson. Do you know Kelly Clarkson?
Of course I do. I like her.
That's cool. So look, it's time for you to go back to work, damn it, because the Greek economy needs you.
All right. Thank you so much,
Thank you,
everyone.
Vanessa.
It was great talking to you.
Thank you
Thanks
for
everything.
calling. That's fantastic.
Bye-bye.
Lily, I'm afraid we've just done our last call. We're just going to go around and get some final words from some people. And then I'll conclude by reading one more thing that I posted to the forum. So, Eric, let's get to the mic to Eric. I didn't give you any time to prepare. Just say something really quickly to that pertains to Chapter 9.3 or to where we are at this point, or anything. Or pass the mic to Mary.
So there's been a lot of furore around Kenneth Goldsmith. And there's also been a lot of furore around this university's decision to allow the framing of a certain course in a certain way. And this course
You can say what the course is. Yeah.
Yes, wasting time on the internet. And, I think
Kenny Goldsmith
that's right.
is teaching at Penn,
that's right.
again, as he has for 10 years, and that is the name of his spring semester course taught in this building. Go ahead.
So recently, Kenneth pointed out, quite rightly, that there have in fact been other courses that tried to do something similar, but they used extremely neutral language, which was unprovocative, and no one noticed it was going on. Okay? So he reframed that piece of language in a way that was, in a sense, more emotive, more honest, and drew our engagement with it. And some of that engagement made it possible to see how we've been sort of sleepwalking around certain issues about how we live today. And lots of journalists fell into the pit of this. Okay? So,
well, he drew them there.
He drew them there.
Like
absolutely.
dinosaurs at the tar pits.
So I want people, as they read the poets of 9.3, to think about how poets, through little bits of reframing, provoke all sorts of information and all sorts of responses to that information from us, and to monitor ourselves closely. What are our stock responses, and what are the most appropriate responses? Read closely not just the poems, but how we live and how we respond to them. And I think you will find that there is great enlightenment to be had through engagement with what we're doing right now in 9.3.
Thank you, Eric, very much. So, Mary, I'm going to invite everybody to do, if we're going to go around to everybody, it's got to be like 30 seconds at most. Mary?
Well, I really enjoyed the poets this week. Thank you so much, Al. And I'm very sad that this is the end. I actually was heartbroken when I started to read and realized, oh, this is going to be the last week. We're going to get this bunch of new poems, this new talk and everything. Thank you so much. And I want to just go back to something that you said really early on, a quote from your first letter where you said, I want to be meeting at the edge of poetry to define what it is. And I liked the word meeting because I think that's what we're doing. We're meeting these poets and we're learning how to read. We're very much learning how to read differently through the course of this whole class. And that's what I'm taking
Thank you, Mary.
away.
And if a MOOC isn't arranging by chance to meet, I don't know what the hell is. Jason, quickly, please.
Sure. I think that the poets of this week really bring out something that we've talked about during the session has been the relationship between the writer and the reader, but I think that I think Charles Bernstein has a spelling of reading as WREADING, and I think that what the poets of 9.3 are allow us each to be our writer readers and to stop being a kind of reader looking up at a poem on the page, and to be able to see ourselves as each capable of, through reading in our daily lives, be engaged in a process of writing.
Nice, thank you. Love that confusion of reader and writer. Lily Applebaum, final word quickly.
Yeah, I guess just a plug for we talked about dissenters a lot in this webcast, but if you like conceptual poetry and you want to hear more from specifically female conceptual poets, I really recommend I'll Drown My Book, which is an anthology of conceptual poetry by women writers, and Caroline Bergvall is one of the editors of that anthology.
And so is Lainey Brown, who's one of our poets.
And there are a couple other editors too. And there was a great program at the Writers' House, I think last year, maybe the year before, where we had several readers perform their work that was anthologized there. So if you just search the Writers' House calendar for I'll Drown My Book or Conceptual Women, something like that, you should find it. And yeah.
Great suggestion. And if you listen to the audio intro to Chapter 9.3, I give a detailed description of that book and all of the writers in that book, so you can go back to that and listen. So, Logan, who traveled a long way, bring the mic right up to you. Final word quickly, please.
Yeah, I guess it's also kind of sad that this is going on to be almost over, but it has really given me a lot of insights into how to close read poetry and how to really progress, and I plan on continuing learning more and more about poetry.
Fantastic, Logan. We hope to see you again. Maurice Kachansky, final word, please.
Yeah, to briefly revisit the concept of poethics, I think I see that as a poetry that is not prescriptive, that doesn't attempt to speak for or define the reader or define the subject in the poem. It doesn't attempt to limit, and is rather sort of open in the way that Jason was talking about earlier. It doesn't speak down to the reader. And the second thing I wanted to say is I hope that Dan's pearls of wisdom get collected into a chapbook, because every single one is absolutely remarkable and just, amazing. Thanks,
Okay,
Dan.
Dan, Maurice is suggesting that you write a book, and you actually write all the time. I mean, I can see that there are some disadvantages to having to write what you speak, but one of the great advantages is that device has kept a record of all of it, so it's you're in a pretty unusual and amazing situation.
Thank you. That's so kind. I think that's the best idea I have ever heard.
So, Maurice, you're going to get the dedication in that book. Anna, final word, please.
Getting unmuted.
Unmute.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to Carl, who stopped by my office hours this morning and asked a great question about how to go forward post end of ModPo. And I guess I just want to say to him and to anyone else, this isn't the end. This is really a beginning. And if you're doing this for the first time, then keep at it and keep going and keep reading. Keep close reading together. Find people who you want to read with. And if you're coming back again, then you know that this doesn't end. I think we've started such a great dialogue, even from the people who have been with us since the beginning, and there's just so much more out there. This is just a slice. So keep reading.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you very much. Erica?
For my final words, I want to share something posted by Terry Talty in my office hours last night that I thought was awesome. And what she did was kind of make a connection between Kenny Goldsmith's use of transcription and John Cage's ideas about composition. And she writes, "My writing is different from yours in its composition. That's the traditional thinking. Kenny Goldsmith is not actually composing, he's transcribing everything so that he and I are both reading the results. He is making history. He is now a reader and a composer of what's important by what he's choosing to take in, just like me, a reader of soliloquy." And she continues, and I thought that that was awesome.
Beautiful. Fantastic, Terry and Erica, thank you. Max, final word?
Just a quick shout out to the Chicago folks who I got to hang out with last night. I hope that we'll see each other again. And also, what I was just thinking about, revisiting the conceptual poets this week, is how we get two different kinds of approaches to the archive and approaches to what it means to like work with pre-existing language. So you get this super like heroic masculinist approach with Christian Book and Kenny Goldsmith, who need to like put everything in a book, and then you get this like this somewhat more interesting and like disruptive approach from Tracy Morris or Caroline Bergvall, right, who are content with sort of playing with one single phrase and figuring out different ways of making it mean, right, like through its performance and through its utterance. And I just think it's interesting that we have this like this return to work after all these, after having read all these poets who like don't want to work, like Ted Berrigan and Laurie Niedecker and the Beats and stuff, and
even, Ashbery.
And even Ashbery, famously, yeah. I mean, he's our touchstone there. I think it's interesting that we have this return to obsessive kind of transcription that Kenny Goldsmith does, needing to have this kind of work that he does all the time. That poetry becomes work rather than something sort of parallel to it or kind of shooting off from it.
Mm-hmm. Good distinction, very helpful. Thank you. And I'll just note, since you shouted out to the Chicago people, that tomorrow, Friday, the 14th, I will be in Madison, Wisconsin, spending the whole day there, and there's a program in the late morning, maybe 9:45. I'll be presenting about ModPo, and if you're near Madison, please come. So, Dave Poplar, final word.
Just an observation, because I think a lot about why we try to define poetry, can we? And it brings me back to the thought that we, as mammals, like to see intention. We have an instinct to see intention in the world. When something happens, we try to ascribe intention to it. Somebody did that, or it was done by something. And I think that folds into our notion of creativity. We like to see, or we like to feel like there's something at work there. And when we get farther away from that and we get into randomness and we feel like there's nobody at work there, it makes us more uncomfortable. So I feel like that reaction that a lot of people have to this chance poetry, to uncreativity, is natural and in a sense almost instinctual, but we can recognize that and then move on and go past it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dave. Dan Bergman, final word.
So Dan wrote, "The language that is most open is a language that is true. The gesture of the poet is to invite the reader into their poem to make meaning for themselves. The work this requires is the life-giving work that the poets give us in our shared language." And when Max was saying about work, he said, "Work is life-giving for me and for everyone."
Very nice. Thank you, Dan. Julia Block, final word.
I'm thinking a lot about poetry as exchange and poetry about what happens between people. And we've talked a lot about the essay as a form of exchange also. So I have a shout out to Susanna Pereira, Pereira, whose essay actually on Frank O'Hara has almost 230 responses to it in the thread.
How did that
the
happen?
Conversation just keeps going on, and it was updated as recently as this morning. So that's a perfect example of the conversation that just goes on. And then my other shout out is to Norma Duncan, who's one of the many people we emailed this week to say, hey, we would love to hear more from you. on your experiment and on your thoughts about it. And just so you guys know, when we email you, which is a very strange thing to do in a MOOC.
Yeah, unheard of except in this MOOC.
It's not a punitive gesture. It's a gesture towards opening up the conversation. And so Norma, like many others, has responded really graciously by posting more to her assignment and extending the conversation forward, which is a core principle of the pedagogy here because it's a core principle of the poetry.
Beautifully put. I just want to play, for my final word, a couple of seconds of Caroline Bergvall's amazing performance of Via, and then I want to read you something that I wrote this morning early, caffeinated, in response to somebody talking about how poetry for me must hit my ear in a very special way. This is actually from an anonymous dissenter who was trying to make a distinction between the poetry that he doesn't like and the poetry that he does like, and the poetry he does like is the poetry that hits his ear in a certain way. So here's Caroline Bergvall.
Along the journey of the wayfaring of our life, since missed the right way, through a night dark wood, struggling, I found myself. Musgrave, 1893. Halfway along the road we have to go, I found myself obscured in a great forest, bewildered, and I knew I had lost the way. Sisson, 1981. Halfway along the journey of our life, I woke in wonder
Chris,
in a
I'd like you to
sunless
keep
wood,
that playing. I'm
for I
going to
had
bring the
wandered
sound down
from the narrow
myself.
way.
Okay.
Zapula, 1998.
Poetry for me, she wrote, she wrote,
Halfway on our life's
must
journey,
hit my ear in a
wood,
very
from
special
the
way.
right path I found myself astray.
And I wrote,
Parsons,
the wonderful thing about the ear, what is called the ear
halfway
for
through our
poetry
trek
in
in life,
particular,
I found myself in this
is
dark
that
wood,
hearing changes
miles
over
away from the
time,
right road.
era,
Ellis,
epoch,
1995.
but also over the course of one's life, aging,
Halfway upon the
experience,
journey of our life,
etc.
I found myself within a gloomy
Bergvall's
wood,
Via will
by
be
reason that the
annoyingly
path
repetitive,
direct was lost.
frustrating, and grating to some
1854.
now, and sonorous and beautiful 2 years
Halfway
from
upon the
now.
journey of our life,
Stein and
I roused to
Cage
find myself within a
distinctly
forest, in darkness,
urged us to
for the
keep
straight
listening
way had
until
been
what
lost.
seems unbeautiful
Johnson,
seems beautiful.
1915.
Beauty will out.
In middle of
Nellie
the journey of our
Sachs,
days,
Holocaust survivor
I found
poet,
that I was in
urged
the dark
us
some wood,
to learn to
the right
listen to
road
the
lost,
dissonance of their
and vanished
voices,
in the maze.
those bearing witness,
Sybil,
often difficult for us
1884.
to hear. Yes, psycholinguists
In midway of the
and
journey of our life,
neuroscientists
I found myself
are
within
learning a
darkling
lot
wood,
about what is
because the
innately
rightful
good
pathway
for
had
us to
been
hear.
lost. Rossetti,
But that's never going to be the whole story. Our
in
ears
our life's
adapt,
journey, at its midway
for
stage,
example, to the
I
ambient,
found
noisy
myself within a
language
wood
around us.
obscure, where the right path
I think of
which
a poem
guided
by
me was
William
lost.
Carlos Williams from the great
Johnson,
book Spring and All about the
1967.
crowd at the baseball game.
In the middle of the journey
Somewhat the
of
broken,
our life,
the
I came to
broken
myself
green glass
in a
to the
dark
modern
forest,
eye, somewhat
the
like the
straightforward
broken
way,
green glass to the modern
misplaced.
eye. There was the
Schwerner,
noisy nonsense of
2000.
tens of thousands of baseball fans,
In the middle
buzzing,
of the journey of our life, I
babbling,
came to myself
saying
in a
utterly
dark wood,
unimportant
for the straight
things.
road was lost.
Whitman loved
Durling,
this, and
1996.
that baseball poem is Williams at his Whitmanian best.
In the middle of the journey
He wasn't
of our
watching the
life,
baseball game,
I
he was
came
listening to the
myself
crowd.
within a dark wood,
The
where the straight road was
conceptualists,
lost.
Goldsmith
Sinclair,
and others,
1939.
are bringing back that sight
In
of
the middle
Whitman's
of the journey of
openness
our life,
to all the
I found
sounds
myself
of
astray in a
people
dark wood, where the
making
straight
noise
road had
as
been
they
lost
live
sight
their
of.
lives.
Heaney,
And then I went back to the
1993.
phrase by the anonymous
In
dissenter.
the middle of the journey
Poetry
of our
for
life,
me
I
must
found
hit my
myself within
ear
a
in a
dark
very
wood.
special
I
way.
found myself in a dark wood,
And
where
I
the
thought
straight
about the
way
word
was lost.
special.
Carlyle,
Poetry should hit my ear in a
1844.
special way. And I wrote, special is
In the
fortunately a
mid-journey of our
category
mortal life,
only you can
I wandered
describe
far
for
into
yourself.
darksome wood, where
And
the
then I
true
thought
road no
about the
longer
word
might be
way
seen.
in the phrase,
Chaplin,
poetry for me must hit
1913.
my ear in a very special way. And I wrote
In the
finally
mid-time
this.
of life, I found myself
Way is
within
what
a dusky
ModPo
wood.
is
My way
entirely
was
about.
lost.
The
Shaw,
way you say what you
1914.
say is as important as what you
In the
say.
midway of this our mortal
The
life,
way,
I found me in
the
a
path,
gloomy wood, astray,
always
gone from the
midway
path
on that
direct.
path,
Carey,
always lost
1805.
as Jason was saying so eloquently, uneloquently in response to Tracy before. Always lost, always unable to find the way, always on the way, always midway, the way, Ray Armantrout, the Dickinsonian, the way that is nearly lost in the Creeley poem, I Know a Man. The darkness surrounds us. What can we do against it? And why? Why not buy a goddamn big car? Drive. The way. The driverless car at the end of Williams to Elsie. Ginsberg, late at night in the supermarket, wondering which way we are going. America. Walt, point your beard down the way, and we will walk together into the suburbs and be different. These are all ways. You know, I said to the anonymous dissenter, you know the aesthetic way for you. Stay on that way. These poets variously explore paths, follow any or all. There's no road less or more traveled.
Midway in the journey of our life, I found myself in a dark wood
Jamie,
where the straight road was lost.
Karen from Florida, Jamie from Nashville, Shannon, and her daughter, Zuza.
Midway life's journey, I was made
Terry,
aware that I strayed
Pamela
into
calling from New York, I'm going
right
to see her tonight,
path from
Vanessa
here,
from
not
Greece, Logan for traveling,
1933.
Mary, Eric, Jason, Dan,
Midway
Julia,
on my life's journey,
Dave,
I found myself
Amaris,
in dark
Anna,
woods,
Max,
the right road lost.
Erica,
Pinsky.
our
Midway
unspoken
on the journey
heroes
of our life,
lost along the
I
way
found
of
myself
technology,
within a dark psalm wood,
never
where the right
able
way
to
was
escape
lost.
it finally,
Sullivan,
echoing all along down the lane, Zach Gardner and Chris Martin.
Midway, the path
We
of
bid
life
you
that
a
men
beautiful
pursue,
day,
I
and we
found
will
me
see
in
you
a dark
Monday,
wood
November
astray.
17th at
The
11
direct way
a.m.
had been
for the
lost to view.
final words.
Anderson,
Take care, everybody.
1921.